Okay, so, failure, right? It's something we all deal with
Yeah.
and no one really enjoys.
Nobody likes to fail.
Right. But what if I told you that a lot of what we think about failure, like what we think we know about failing, is wrong?
Interesting.
And that understanding the reasons behind our flops
Okay.
can actually help us grow from them.
Interesting.
So in this deep dive, we're going to look at the surprising truth about why we fail.
Okay.
And it's a lot more complex than just not trying hard enough.
Yeah. I think what's so interesting about this topic is that so many people, when they fail, they internalize it.
Right.
And they start to blame themselves when things go wrong.
Yeah.
And there's so much more to it than that. There's psychology involved, there's these hidden biases, and even external systems that we rarely consider.
Exactly. And today we're going to unpack a really interesting video called Why Do We Fail? The Shocking Truth You Don't Want to Hear.
Okay, sounds good.
And hopefully by the end of this deep dive, you'll not only understand those hidden forces, but you'll have some strategies to actually turn failures into wins.
I like it.
So yeah, buckle up.
Let's get into it.
Let's start by exploring the psychological side of things.
Okay.
Have you ever felt that fear of messing up? Like that anxiety that kind of just paralyzes you?
Yeah, for sure. I know exactly what you mean.
So it turns out there's a name for that. Aticophobia.
Aticophobia.
Yeah.
Aticophobia.
Huh.
And it's the intense fear of failure.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I've definitely felt that, especially when, I'm trying something new.
Oh, for sure.
How does this fear of failing show up in people's lives?
I mean, there are so many ways it can manifest, right? It could be that crippling anxiety that we just talked about, or just constant self-doubt, right?
Right.
Or even, some people will avoid situations where they might risk failing at all.
Oh, yeah.
It's like their brain is convinced that if they mess up, it's a threat to their survival or something.
Wow.
And this ties directly into what we call the self-worth theory. Okay, so what is the self-worth theory all about?
Oh, okay. So basically it says that, you know how we tie our success to our sense of self? So then when we fail, it doesn't just feel like we messed up a task.
Right.
It feels like we messed up as people.
Oh, wow.
Like we're not good enough.
Yeah.
So that's why even small failures can just, hit us really hard emotionally.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
No wonder we try to avoid failing at all costs.
Right.
But, okay, beyond this fear factor, the video also talks about these things called cognitive biases.
Yes.
What are those all about?
Cognitive biases, those tricky little mental shortcuts, right?
Yeah.
So one of the big ones related to failure is the overconfidence bias. Basically, we tend to overestimate our abilities and underestimate the risks involved.
Oh, yeah, I've totally been there.
Right. It's like classic Icarus flying too close to the sun because he thought his wings were, invincible.
Exactly. It's called the Icarus paradox, right? Where our strengths can actually become our downfall.
Yeah.
Because we don't acknowledge our limitations.
Exactly.
Okay, and then there's the perfectionism trap.
Yes. Perfectionism. We set these impossibly high standards for ourselves. And then what happens?
We procrastinate.
Procrastination.
Yes.
And we get overwhelmed.
Oh, I know that cycle all too well.
Research suggests that procrastination isn't just laziness.
Oh, really?
It's often a defense mechanism to protect us from the potential pain of not meeting these ridiculously high standards.
So we're avoiding the task to avoid failing.
Exactly.
Which makes us more likely to fail.
Right. Ironic, right?
Yeah.
Like we're sabotaging ourselves to protect our egos.
So we're messing with ourselves.
Yeah, our own minds.
But it's not just our own minds that are messing with us.
Oh, no, definitely not.
The video also hints at something pretty shocking.
Okay.
That failure isn't always our fault.
Interesting.
Sometimes it's the systems around us. What's that all about?
This is where things get really interesting, right? Failure isn't just this individual isolated experience.
Right.
It's woven into the fabric of our work, our relationships, even things like sports.
Yeah.
Think about it. 90% of startups fail.
Yeah, that's a lot.
And some people might call those learning experiences.
Sure.
But let's be real. The cost of those failures, financially, emotionally, relationally, it's huge.
Yeah.
It's not something to be taken lightly.
Right. And even in something like pro sports, where everyone is striving for that top spot.
Yeah.
Failure is inevitable.
Right.
But it's how those athletes deal with the losses and pick themselves back up and keep going.
Exactly.
That seems to define their careers in the long run.
Absolutely. And that brings us to this critical truth about failure that's often overlooked. Sometimes it's not about you at all.
Wait, are you saying it's not always our fault when we fail?
Yeah, sometimes we're operating in systems or cultures that practically set us up for failure.
Mm.
It's things like unrealistic deadlines, lack of training, lack of support,
Yeah.
sometimes even toxic behaviors, bullying, things that chip away at our confidence.
Yeah.
These pressures contribute just as much to our struggles as our own internal fears and biases.
So it's like we're blaming ourselves
Yeah,
when the environment itself is kind of contributing to the problem.
exactly, exactly.
It's like trying to grow a plant in bad soil
It's such a great analogy.
and then wondering why it's wilting.
Yeah, exactly.
So how do we shift our thinking from I failed to like this situation was stacked against me?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And honestly, the answer lies in embracing something that can be uncomfortable, which is vulnerability.
Vulnerability.
Yeah, a lot of really successful people, leaders around the world, they openly talk about how their failures were their greatest teachers.
Oh, interesting.
They learned to own their mistakes, analyze what went wrong, and use those insights to improve.
So it's not about pretending we're perfect.
No, not at all.
It's more about having the courage to say, hey, I messed up, but here's what I learned.
Exactly.
Is there like research that supports this?
Yeah, there's actually a growing body of research, especially in leadership, and studies have shown that the most effective leaders, they aren't the ones who never make mistakes.
Really?
It's the leaders who are willing to acknowledge weaknesses, seek feedback, and adapt based on what they learn.
Okay, that's interesting.
They see setbacks as opportunities for growth
That makes sense.
rather than personal defeats.
Okay, so let's get practical.
Yeah, let's do it.
What are some tangible things that our listeners can do to turn these like oops moments into growth?
Okay, so a few key strategies.
Okay.
First, self-reflection.
Okay.
After a setback, don't just brush it off.
Mm-hmm.
Take some time to analyze what happened.
Yeah.
Ask yourself, what were my actions?
Mm-hmm.
What could I have done differently? What can I learn from this? Treat each failure as a case study.
It's like being curious about our mistakes rather than being judgmental.
Exactly. It's like you're a scientist conducting an experiment.
Okay.
You test something, it doesn't work out, so you go back, analyze the data, and use that info to refine your approach.
I like that.
It's a good way to think about it.
What else? What else can we do?
Another one is to set realistic goals.
Okay.
When we set impossibly high standards, we're setting ourselves up for failure.
Yeah.
Instead, break down big challenges into smaller, more manageable steps. This makes progress feel more attainable, reduces the pressure.
That's so true. I've definitely fallen into the trap of setting these huge goals
Right.
and then feeling completely overwhelmed when I stumble.
Exactly.
It's much more encouraging to focus on those small wins
Absolutely.
along the way.
Yeah, and don't underestimate vulnerability and connection.
Oh,
Talk to someone you trust, a friend, mentor, coach, about your struggles.
yeah.
Sometimes just voicing those experiences can help you process those difficult emotions.
It's like that saying, a problem shared is a problem halved.
Exactly.
Just having someone to listen can make a huge difference.
Absolutely.
What other strategies do you think are helpful?
Well, one that's often overlooked is developing your emotional intelligence.
Okay.
Learning to recognize and manage your emotions, especially when you fail, is crucial.
Yeah.
This means being aware of your inner dialogue, those negative thoughts that pop up when things go wrong, and learning to challenge them.
So like being mindful of our inner critic
Yes.
and learning to reframe those thoughts into something more constructive.
Exactly. Techniques like mindfulness meditation, journaling, or even just taking deep breaths can help.
Yeah.
This allows you to respond to setbacks from a place of calm
That makes sense.
rather than reacting impulsively.
Okay, but wouldn't all this make us less likely to take risks in the first place?
That's a great question.
If we're so focused on like analyzing our failures, won't we just play it safe all the time?
It brings up an important point. The goal isn't to become paralyzed by fear.
Okay.
It's about developing a healthy relationship with failure, one where you acknowledge it's inevitable, learn from it, and use it to grow.
So it's not about avoiding it.
Oh.
It's about becoming more resilient, more adaptable, and more capable of bouncing back.
Exactly. And remember, seeking feedback is essential.
Okay.
Don't shy away from constructive criticism.
Right.
Embrace it.
Yeah.
The more you're willing to learn from others, the more equipped you'll be to handle future challenges.
All this sounds really empowering.
It is empowering.
It's like we're shifting from a fear-based approach to one rooted in curiosity and growth.
Absolutely.
It's about recognizing that, failure is part of being human,
It is.
but it doesn't have to define us.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that failure, while often painful, can be our greatest teacher.
Yeah.
It's through those experiences that we learn, we adapt, and we discover our potential.
Okay, so wrapping things up.
Yeah.
We've learned that failure is this like multifaceted thing that's influenced by our own psychology and those sneaky biases and even the systems that we're a part of.
Absolutely.
But the big takeaway is that it doesn't have to define us.
I think it's amazing that just by understanding the root causes of failure, we can really start to dismantle that fear surrounding it. And it becomes less about personal shortcomings and more about valuable lessons that can move us forward.
Yeah, it's like that saying, every master was once a disaster.
Oh, I like that.
We've all like stumbled our way through challenges.
Right.
But it's those experiences that shape us.
Exactly. And remember, failure, it's universal.
Yeah.
It's everywhere. It touches every part of life. Careers, relationships, personal pursuits. It connects us all.
It's like a rite of passage.
Yeah.
I mean, we've all felt that disappointment, that weight of like what we think is a personal shortcoming.
But the real test isn't whether we fall. It's how we get back up. By understanding those internal and external factors that contribute to failure, we can equip ourselves to navigate those challenges better.
So instead of being afraid of failing, we can see it as like a signpost, a feedback loop.
Yeah, I love that.
That helps us learn and adapt and ultimately reach our goals.
It all comes down to shifting our perspective from shame and self-blame to curiosity and growth.
That's powerful.
It is.
It's like failure becomes less about a final verdict.
Right.
And more about an ongoing process of learning.
Exactly.
So to wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
I want to leave you with this question.
Okay.
Instead of fearing failure, how can you start viewing it as an integral part of your journey toward growth and success?
That's such a great question for everyone to consider.
Yeah, we all have our own stories and our own paths.
Right.
And those paths will have like twists and turns and even failures.
But those so-called failures, they're often the richest opportunities for learning. They shape our resilience and our ability to adapt and our capacity for achieving great things.
So embrace the messiness, the imperfections, those stumbles along the way.
They're not setbacks, they're setups.
Exactly.
For something greater.
Keep learning, keep growing, and never let that fear of failure hold you back.
Couldn't have said it better myself.